All right, welcome everyone. I'm Wendy O'Sullivan, the superintendent for the National Park Service Chesapeake office. We're excited for you to join us today for our grant submission workshop. With me this afternoon is a team that has been hosting these sessions for our grant offering. Eddie Gonzalez, who's the NPS Chesapeake Gateways Director of Partnerships and Grants, is here. Bob Campbell, the NPS Chesapeake Gateways Planning and Development Manager. Rebecca Stanfield McCowan, who's the Director of the Stewardship Institute with the National Park Service, and Brent Mitchell, who's with our partner, the QLF. So we will get started with running through a little bit of background in case we have some new members of the public and partners that are joining us. So we'll just go with the next slide. So we just wanted to start with sort of where we are and some key dates that everyone is tracking sort of the process. We've had several sessions already as background on the grant offering. Those are posted online and we'll share a link so folks can go see those previous recordings. And today we're focused on the grant writing workshop. So really sort of drilling down how to apply, the steps, and we have a checklist to run through with everyone. We're considering potentially adding maybe additional workshops in December. But for now, the next big date is the deadline to apply, which is January 30th of 2023. And then we will be putting together a new series of schedules for the Chesapeake Gateway workshops through the new calendar year and be looking to host a Chesapeake Gateways annual conference later in 2023. So someone said, suddenly not getting audio, we'll sign out and sign back in. Okay, please rejoin. Rico, I saw your note there. Are other people able to hear? If you would just do a thumbs up or a yes in the chat. Okay, great. All right. So next slide, please. Okay, so we start here to really ground everyone in the scale and scope of what the NPS Chesapeake office supports. We are an office that is a partnership network and a community assistance program, and our scope and scale is the full watershed. So the full 41 million acre watershed for the Chesapeake, from upstate New York all the way down to the Virginia Tidewaters. And we really have three primary partnerships that we support, manage, facilitate out of our office. The legislated one that Congress set up to have a role for the Park Service with the Chesapeake is the Chesapeake Gateways program. It's like I said, it's a partnership network and a community assistance program, both technical and financial assistance. We also are a primary federal partner to the Chesapeake Bay program, which is the major federal multi-state effort to conserve and restore the watershed and the bay. And we are the co-conveners of a large landscape collaborative known as the Chesapeake Conservation Partnership, and play a role in bringing that effort forward as well. Next slide. And so just to share a little bit more about the Chesapeake Gateways program, it is a program that's focused on the places and the people and the stories that make the Chesapeake special. And we have a very purposeful, renewed focus on equity and inclusion in bringing those stories forward and sharing those spaces. And we function at various scales. So we maintain a network of partners that are places. So some places are gateway sites. So individual museums, parks, state parks, national parks, wildlife refuges, historic ports and historic museums. There's also places in the network that are heritage areas. There's places in the network that are at a larger landscape scale. And we try to connect those places to make sure the public is really aware of all the ways to learn about and connect with the Chesapeake. We also function at a landscape scale, a regional scale. So the upper Susquehanna or the lower James, for example, and that's what those sort of blue bubbles are on the map. In addition, we're moving forward with a concept, an initiative to begin to work at a community scale and have in the coming year intention to hold meetings and sessions around Chesapeake Gateway communities. Next slide. Our legislation that was created in 1998 is the Chesapeake Bay Initiative Act, and it sets out both the authorities and responsibilities of the Park Service for the Chesapeake Gateways Network. And really it is grounds us in this new grant offering and allows for a very broad list of eligible entities to receive the grants, and it frames out the intention and opportunities. Next slide. And so just to sort of show what the way the dollars are available and how they function within the NPS Chesapeake office, we receive up to $3 million a year that's authorized as appropriation to the NPS Chesapeake office. And they go and then break out into sort of three general buckets. A portion of it goes towards what we would consider technical assistance, and that's to cover NPS staff and expertise that then go out as support to partners. There's a portion of the funds that go to cooperative and interagency agreements, and that's financial assistance with substantial NPS involvement. And then this new category that we are adding is the Chesapeake Gateway Grants. And that is financial assistance that goes out to partners and entities to carry out a public purpose. And so we're here today to really drill down on the new grant offering. It's the first time that our office has done a fully competitive formal grant offering through Grants.gov. And so as we are standing this up, we've taken care to think about how to make them accessible, to use our authorities in ways to make them more equitable, and have framed them around our authorities and our strategic priorities that then bring them to a broad range of both places and spaces and entities across the Chesapeake. So today we're going to be drilling down. So I'm going to pass it to Eddie Gonzalez to now take us into the nuts and bolts from here.
Thank you, Wendy. Yeah, I hope everyone's comfortable. We have a lot to cover. It is going to be very slide intensive. We are recording this. We're hoping to really paint a good picture of all the jumping in points that you have, all the steps that you'll need to follow. Our goal with this presentation is to get as many proposals as possible that reflect the needs of the watershed. As I've been talking about this series of grants, we're doing two things with this. One is providing the support that our office can through the funding that we receive, and make sure that it gets to places where there's a need for innovation or a need to move things to the next level. So we want to be able to provide that through these grants. But it's also to start creating resources that the entire network can start accessing. So some of the things that you'll hear about today are going to be things that you'll be able to go back to and refer to as you're contemplating your proposal. It is going to be a lot. Again, we are recording it, and there'll be some follow-up that we'll be sending everybody in case you miss anything. To start, I want to highlight that we have a landing page created for these network grants that's linked there on the slide. And this really should be your starting point if you're starting to prepare yourself for everything grant related. Within that page, you'll have all the different components of the application broken out in sometimes in more accessible language, but it'll mirror everything that's included in the actual application. And then at the bottom of the page, you'll see some boxes that jump you into other resources. The Gateway Network chat is the link to our YouTube channel that'll get you all the past access to all the past recordings that we've done. We're not going to spend as much time talking about strategic relevance and the components or elements of what we would be looking for topically, but we did go through that in the overview last month, so you can access that through the YouTube channel. And then there's a link, the apply for assistance is the actual link to the application. The frequently asked questions section I did want to highlight because over the last month and a half, we've been collecting a lot of questions. A lot of them have been very similar. So definitely go to that document and use it as a way of seeing if there's answers already there to things that you're already thinking about. We did just update it with another round. So make sure you start with the landing page and get yourself set for this process. I want to begin again with just the highlights of what is being offered. As Winnie mentioned, we get about $1 million in appropriations designated for grants. This year, we are looking potentially upwards of about $2 million as we're still calculating some carryover funds. We don't have the exact amount, but we're likely going to benefit this year from having more than our standard $1 million offering. For us, that means even more opportunity to get more proposals funded, which means we really want to see as many proposals as possible so that we have a good landscape to work from. We are still targeting two grant levels, 25 to 50,000 and then 51 to 150,000. So start thinking about your scopes within those two scales. With the increase in funding available, it'll likely allow us to fund more than what we were expecting in both of those categories. So we're really excited to have that at our disposal. We are accepting grants in two grant categories that match two of the themes within our strategic plan: inclusive interpretive initiatives and resilient communities and landscapes. Again, there's a lot more detail in what all that means in the overview that you can go back to and review, and also in the grants landing page. And as mentioned in past webinars, we are providing a very purposeful focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and community engagement. We do see ourselves as being an opportunity to invest and are looking for those places where people from the network are working in these areas where there's an opportunity for us to really make a difference. Another thing to remind everybody is that there's no match requirement. So as you're contemplating project ideas and the funding that you'll need, this grant is, we're designing this so that the entirety of those funds that you would need are going to come from this opportunity. So as you're putting your budget together, think about all the pieces that you would need to fund and make sure that they're being accommodated for in your budget and that it fits within that $150,000 cap. But beyond that, you should be able to cover all of your expenses without a match requirement. Also, another thing to highlight is that this is being available to a broad range of eligible entities. Almost pretty much everybody except the federal government and individuals are eligible to apply. We do have some more defined lists in the landing page and in the application. If you have any questions about your eligibility, there's a email address that we'll post at the end of the slide that you can email to get some clarity. I'll go through this a little bit more, but all projects must have a public purpose and occur within the Chesapeake watershed. We are limited to funding and supporting projects within the scope of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. We're also happy that we've been able to provide a pretty lengthy application window. So grants applications are not due until January 30th. We hope that gives you enough time to figure out the process, get all the steps together, and organize your thoughts into what will be your proposal. It's also a good time to mention organizations can submit more than one proposal in the same theme or covering both themes or each covering different themes. Each proposal is going to be reviewed independently. So if you have a couple of ideas and don't want a chance putting them all into one, feel free to break them apart. Once you figure out the system, it's going to be the same system for all of your ideas. And all of this, you can get started through all of these processes by starting at our grants page that I mentioned earlier. So, the first thing that we wanted to establish is just a common understanding of what we're doing here. We are providing financial assistance through grants. And I mention that because grants means a very specific thing to a federal agency. It is a legal instrument that we are going to be establishing with you that'll have rules associated with it. It'll have expectations of performance on both sides. So it's a document that's meant to make things clear to the grantee as well as us as the providing agency. But it's a legal instrument for financial assistance between the Park Service and a non-federal entity to carry out a public purpose. And the other caveat is that these are seen by the federal government as not requiring substantial assistance or involvement. You're going to be applying using a scope through the application process. We're going to be determining the best places to make those investments. And once award letters go out, there'll be some oversight and reporting, but the projects are really on your own to develop according to what you set out in the narrative, in the application. So what is a public purpose? The very specific definition from the federal guidance is that it's a purpose that serves or is intended to serve the interests of the general public or a segment of the public. They have to have a public benefit. So it's either a benefit that accrues over time as you're providing those services or something that you're providing at the point of service. Your proposal needs to demonstrate that public purpose. An example that we use is if you have a historic collection that you're looking to get funding to preserve. It's in a really bad state. If it goes on much longer, there's fear that some of those artifacts might disintegrate or no longer be available. So you might think, hey, let's put in some funding to get these artifacts conserved and preserved. While that in itself is a valuable effort and something that probably is going to be very needed, we would need to know that the intention of preserving and conserving those artifacts would be then to make them publicly available versus preparing them for long-term storage, for example. So just one example of what we mean by the public purpose piece. The activity itself is not what we're looking at. It's the utility of that activity. How will it be applied to creating a public benefit? The other part that I do want to emphasize is that our goal here is to make this process as accessible to everyone as possible. And we all, some of us have had a lot more experience with federal grant processes, with just federal application processes. They can be a bear. A lot of it, we're guided by guidances that exist for all federal agencies. So we're not designing these grants.gov websites on our own or adding extra steps just for the sake of adding them. But what we can do is try to make it as easily to navigate as possible. So to that end, and it just got added like 20 minutes ago, our web coworker was able to get it up on the website. So if you were to go to our landing page, in that bottom section, you'll see a box now that says checklist, and it'll take you to a document. I've got it summarized here, but essentially we've broken apart the application process into the various different components that you'll need to plan for. The pre-application phase, really investing some time in going through the eligibility, because we don't want any proposal to come in to get kicked out for any reason on eligibility. And then, you're jumping in points with getting registered in SAM.gov and in Grants.gov. And then, as much as we can, we've tried to walk you through all the different parts of the application process. As soon as you hit that apply button, these match up with fields that you'll be asked to fill in. Where possible, we've indicated the typical answer that you would be applying. So again, we're trying to make it as specific as possible. Now, we did create this with a general walkthrough, but we didn't actually go in and submit an application to verify some of the interactive pieces. So if you do notice that there's something that has changed in grants.gov that's different from what's in the checklist, just send an email to our general email address, chesapeakegrants@nps.gov. Actually, that's underscore. I'll fix that. But that way we can modify it and make sure that it's accurate for everybody. But otherwise, we have mapped out as much of the process as possible, giving you little notes on things to consider when it's asking for certain things. So, we do want it to be a page that you can utilize as a step-by-step check of your work before you get to the submit. And obviously the final checkbox here would be that you submitted before midnight on January 30th. Any proposals that either come in incomplete or are not submitted by that deadline, we will not have an opportunity to reopen up the site to get those considered. So please utilize all the tools that we're making available to you. Before I leave the checklist, I also want to emphasize that this is not a part of your application. Please do not include the checklist in with your application materials. One, it'll count against your 8-page limit, and it also will not get reviewed. It is meant for you to use as a tool, but it is not a formal part of the application. I should have said, as questions come up, please add them to the chat. We've got folks that are observing the chat for any questions that are coming up. If anything isn't able to get answered today, we will log it and add it to the FAQ, and everybody that's registered is going to get the slides today, a link to the recording, as well as any updated link to the FAQ with any updated questions that have come up. So utilize the checklist. It is a helpful tool for you. Jumping in. All right, so the first thing we're going to actually talk about is a system that is not part of grants.gov. It's not even part of NPS. It is a separate federally managed system for anybody that is going to be applying for an award, a system for award management. The next few, maybe dozen or so slides are going to be very in the weeds. If you're already in SAM.gov and have done this, feel free to go grab a coffee or answer a couple of emails. When you see Bob again speaking, that'll be your cue to come back to the presentation. Unfortunately, submissions through grants.gov are required. That is the only way we can accept a grant application. And in order to apply through grants.gov, you do have to be registered through sam.gov. Fortunately, the steps that I'm about to walk through, I did myself this weekend. I have a consulting firm that I've used in the past that I was able to use as a sample. So I'm walking this process through you as well. And as we figure out better tools or better tricks, we'll push them out to make sure that there aren't any obstacles for you. But I'm hoping what I'm about to present for anyone that has had trouble with sam.gov, this will at least give you a little bit better understanding of what to do. But definitely, if you have questions as I go, add them into the chat. All right, so the goal of the next few steps is to get you registered into SAM and ending with a request for the UEI that then the sam.gov folks set up responses to you to be able to get that unique entity identifier. And don't forget, this is being recorded, so don't try to quickly scribble it down. Everything you'll be able to go back into and refer to. The first step is going to be to create an account. Fortunately, the federal government has combined sam.gov with login.gov, which is a catch-all login portal that allows you to create an account login and then utilize that in sam.gov. So that'll be the first thing that you'll want to go to. Is if you start at sam.gov and click create an account, it'll kick you over to login.gov, or you can also start at login.gov, create your account, and then use that same login in sam.gov to jump in. Once you've created and the creation of an account is just, you're creating a username, a password. There'll be a verification process to verify that is your email address, and then your account information will become live. Once you log in, you're going to get a dashboard, or a workspace it's called, that starts you in the request process, but then this also logs any open requests that you'll have, and I'll show you the difference when we get towards the end. So all the screens you're seeing are the screens that I was capturing as I was going through it through my process. So these are exactly what I saw 3 days ago. To start, you're going to be hitting this Get Started button, and that's going to take you to what do you want to do. There are the other thing to mention is a lot of these tools are used for a lot of different organizations requesting a lot of different types of assistance. So you're really looking for the parts that are relevant to what we're trying to do here. So you're going to start with Register for Financial Assistance Awards only. If you do contracting and procurement, you would be in the Register for All Awards, but there's a lot more steps there. So I'm really only walking through the financial assistance part because that's the one that will get you eligible for a grant. You click on that and you keep advancing. Are you registering as a government entity? No, from my end, from the example I was using, if you are state or municipal government, you would be, it just puts you in a different category as you're filling in all the fields. Registering for financial assistance, again, you'll get these clarification points along the way to just make sure that you're following the path that you're intending to follow. Preparing your data. So there are going to be things, and there's a checklist at the beginning. There's a link to a SAM.gov checklist that'll be in our checklist that'll show you all the documentation that you'll need to prepare. But basically, you're going to need to be able to prove what kind of organization you are and your location, and I'll show you where that comes into play. But this is where you prepare the information that it's asking you to. You'll hit next. The next phase is to validate who you are as an organization, and these are the different things that it's going to be asking you for. You'll put in this information as the screens come up and advance through it. For this one, I was using the fictional widgets are us, just so that I could have something to fill in the fields. At this stage, you'll either have, you'll be a brand new to the system and it won't show up in one of these sample results. You'll see widgets are us is not here. It's a new organization I'd be looking to input. But if you've ever done any work with the federal government, you might see your organization already listed here. If so, you would click on it, and then that would pre-populate some of the things that I'm going to go through the steps of right now instead. So I'm treating it as this is a brand new organization as we're going through the next slides. So I do not recognize my entity on this list. Then it gives me fields I need to start filling in to be able to prove who I am. Incorporation information about my organization. It gives me the opportunity to confirm what I've inputted. And then it's going to ask me for document proof of the information I just provided. So at this point, if you had found your organization and clicked on your box, it'll take you then to the next box. Everybody will come together then with submitting your documents. So the first path, it was new organizations, or you are already in the system, and whatever one you clicked and fill in your information, you'll get to this point where you're going to be asked to attach your documents. If you click that add a document, you're going to get an option for a number of different ways you can prove your identity, the identity of the organization, your organizational articles of incorporation, any bank statement that has your organization's name and address in there. Again, this process is meant to verify that you are an entity that the federal government can give money to. This is not a process that we manage, but it is a process that we are beholden to. We, at the end, will not be able to give out any of the grants to anybody that has not gone through this, which is why you need to do this in order to even apply. So, pick whichever one you think is the easiest one for you to find the documentation on, or, the one that might be more readily available. I chose to submit, when I did this for real for my consulting company, I used my EIN designation letter from the IRS because it had my address on there. But you would pick the one that's relevant to you. Here, it would ask you to verify what that document is able to confirm of the things that they're asking for. And then you upload the document. It went right into submit. So you'll submit that and you get a case number, basically. From there, you're given the option to go into and all of this now is automated. Once you hit submit, it goes into their system. You get an auto-generated email with this case file and a link to be able to check your status. If you go back to that workspace from this button, if you were to click workspace where you started, you will now see a pending request. And so this is where, if you clicked on that, it would show you the same screen that will be emailed to you to check the status. I did mine on Sunday. I just got an email 10 minutes before we started from their system letting me know the next things that I need to provide in order to keep going through the UEI process. So I don't have that to screenshot for you, but at this point, it's become an engagement with the system, and we're hoping that that'll take you all the way through to the UEI. The hard part with this is, well, a couple of things. I mentioned you can't apply without it. And unfortunately, this is not our process. So I can't be sure of how long it'll take for everybody. We are recommending that you start early. After this webinar would be a good time to jump over to login.gov, get your login, jump over to SAM.gov, start that request, and just see what the process looks like for you as you're getting started. All right. There is some magic kind of involved here. You're putting in fields, you're using a process you may have not used before, you're hitting next, you're hitting submit, and then you're kind of sitting back and waiting for the email to start chirping. So we get it. We know that some of this, there's going to be some uncertainty in these steps, but if you can get to that UEI, then you'll be able to deal with the grants.gov piece. There is help available on the SAM.gov through that webpage. There'll be a help link, the workspace, or you can link to it right from this slide and go to the Go to FSD, which is Financial Services Division. I forget what the acronym stands for. But unfortunately, they would be the ones that would have to help you navigate any issues that you would have with SAM.gov. A couple of things to make note: if you've utilized things like DUNS numbers in the past, then you're likely already in the system. Everything has transitioned. There it is, Federal Service Desk. Thanks, Brent. Everything has transitioned from DUNS numbers and Duns and Bradstreet, another third-party firm that used to be used, so that now all of the this unique entity identifier is now done through directly through SAM.gov. But you would still see yourself likely in the system in that spot where I showed you about finding your section, and then that allows you to have some of this pre-filled out for you. And then at that point, you've gotten everything you need on for pre-planning. You're ready to access the grant. This is back on our grant landing page at the bottom. You can click on the apply for assistance box and it takes you to the grants.gov page. You can also utilize a direct grants.gov link that takes you to our grant page. Or if you're on grants.gov, in the search box in the upper right, you type in any part of this name, either the name part, National Park Service Chesapeake Gateway Grants, or P23AS 00041, is our grant opportunity number. All of those will get you to this landing page. From here, you're ready to log in. It'll be the same login you created with login.gov. It does make you log in again. Every one of these is it's one login, but you still have to enter the system. Once you're done that and you've got your UEI, it'll allow you to hit the apply button. Oh, I just mentioned that, login. It allows you to hit the apply button and get the process started. The login, if you have any specific issues with logging in, there is a separate help opportunity for login assistance, and then grants.gov has a community blog post that also walks you through, especially if you've already done login.gov through other agency processes and you need to link it to your grants.gov. It's all pretty seamless. Anywhere you connect, it'll jump you over to login.gov and make you create a universal login.
So Eddie, before
Yes.
we kind of switch gears into a different program, I just want to pause and see if there are any questions about SAM.gov. We got a couple in the chat, just pointing out that if you haven't used your SAM.gov account, you haven't done any work with the government in 12 months, it's likely expired unless you're purposefully keeping it up to date. So you will need to go in and renew that. But like Wendy said, your organization is most likely still on the list. It's just outdated now and needs to be renewed. So it's a process you'll want to go through. But if there are any other questions that folks have before we shift into the next process for applying for the grant, can pop it into the chat or raise your hand.
And I'll just say that the very first comment where it said, for a little organization like ours, SAM's is a nightmare, basically. And we understand that it's a situation where it is the first step to be able to work within grants.gov. So we don't have a way around it. The thing I would say is the difficulty could and should be a greater payoff, because not only would you be in a place where you're able to apply for the NPS grants, it is universal, right? So then you are in the system, and any federal financial assistance that is offered, and that you are eligible for, you then you're not signing up just to be able to apply for NPS Gateways grant. You then are universally within the federal financial assistance system. So there's benefit to getting into that system and access to more federal dollars that are offered every year, every cycle. So I wish there was a way that we could work around in particular SAM.gov. There isn't, but it does then give you access to not just NPS grants, but the whole world that you would be eligible for.
Thanks, Wendy. Yeah, and I also wanted to emphasize that this is year one of an annual grant offering that we're going to be doing. So for multiple reasons, this might not be the right time frame for you to jump in on a grant, but there's going to be a lot more assistance coming out of our office, because we want you to be able to utilize not just our resources, but a lot of the federal money that's coming in through the watershed. So, don't be discouraged if for some reason you just didn't get it together for this offering. I want this to be an ongoing conversation where we've already started talking about things we want to have prepared for next, in advance of next year's application process that'll provide even more clarity and more training on these things. So some of this is, there's resources out there, yes, go look for them and see what works best for you. But we're committed to figuring out other things that we would need to do to help you, even if it may not be until next year's offering. So either way, let us know of issues that you do have, especially as we near the close, so that we can have those things in mind for next year's program.
And like Eddie said, you know, the sooner you start on SAMs, the better positioned you are. Because it does take a little while for each step then goes through their system and then you get the email for the next step. It's not instantaneous. So, you know, I forget what Eddie said. It took like 2-3 days to get his next step email when he was just doing the sort of the mock-up version.
Mhm.
So really, the sooner you start, the more you're on the path to getting those steps completed.
And I also recognize that while there are a lot of help sections available in all these agency websites, some of them need their own help sections just to navigate the help section. So I get that. You know, I've been trying to go through this as a prospective applicant. So, you know, you can have confidence that if you're seeing it, I'm likely seeing it. You know, feel free to highlight some of those things to us so that we know how to provide better tools. You know, we don't want you to feel like you're on your own in these processes. Other
Bob,
questions?
you had something?
I'm just waiting to be next.
Okay.
I think we can move on. Thank you both.
Awesome. So we're going to do a little transition to my awesome partner here, Bob, who's going to walk us through. You know, I put this slide in here because I was really focused on the mechanics to get you to the application. Bob's going to do a deeper dive of the application itself. But a lot of this is really to help you organize yourself, the checklist, the landing page, the webinars we've been putting together. It's so that you have everything in place so that when you jump in with the application, we want you to be successful in submitting it because we want to see it. I want the grant reviewers, as much as it's going to pain them, to review as many proposals as are relevant and express needs that we should know about. So the goal here is to demystify as much of this and set you up for success. So we will move on to the exciting world of the application.
So I like Eddie's transitional slide there, but Mise en place. I don't happen to use that technique at home when I'm cooking, but I certainly recognize the merits of it, and it's you know, we're trying to give you all our best advice, and as Wendy and Eddie are both trying to convey to you that we are highly motivated to make this as straightforward for you as we can, but we with you work within some boundaries that are not of our making, and so you know, some of you are already more mystified just for Eddie having attempted to show you about the SAM.gov process. I have to foretell for you that it doesn't end with SAM.gov. It starts there. Without SAM.gov providing you a UEI, you're not going to be able to answer, you know, I think it's the third question on the federal SF 424 federal application. And so there'll be no beginning for you unless we go through SAM. Ultimately, there can be no award to you unless you'll also have to register with the automated system for award payment and register in Grant Solutions. Those are things that we all just will have to live with. So really what we're trying to do today is to demystify wherever we can just some elements of this overall grant application process that bear calling out because you otherwise might you know, be confused or you know, assign less importance to them than is really necessary. So perhaps the single most important thing to say is that the controlling document, the one that's invested with all the information about what you have to submit and when, is the notice of funding opportunity, which Eddie began with. It's all there. Conform to the guidance in that document if ever in any doubt. You know, today we're again trying to call out some things that are like the little sleeper cells in the process to help you be sure that you're looking for them. But I'll use this as the first example. In the NOFO, it's going to talk about the mandatory requirements for submission, which includes the SF Form 424 and 424A and the project abstract summary and standard forms SF 424B or D. You know, all of those things will make sense to you once you look at those. They are prescribed documents. They're in a specific format designed for your use. Most of those are fillable PDFs. And so the cells that you have to reply are made obvious for you. You'll find your way through there. The ones that I've highlighted here in red are no more important than the others, but no less important either. And I'm gonna spend some time today just emphasizing, if you will, the importance of the project narrative and the detailed budget. Next slide, please, Eddie. So let's talk a bit about the project narrative. It will say that you have an 8-page limit for it, which is trying to give you plenty of real estate, but not too much real estate, not so much real estate that the review panel that might be reviewing 20, 30, 40, 50 or more proposals will break under the weight of so much documentation. But you got 8 good pages and we need you to make good use of it. It includes all the text figures, reference the narrative that you need to provide. It also in the NOFO specifies that some of these documents, specifically the SF forms and your negotiated indirect cross rate agreement, if you have such a thing, those don't count. Those are not the 8-page. So it's gonna tell you what you should try to address in your project narrative, and it's gonna say extra information will not be considered. Let me encourage you all to understand today that selling your project and the ability of your project team to make it successful is not extra information. That's really critical. So this whole workshop today is predicated on our belief in the Chesapeake office that we empathize with your situation. A federal grant application is not an easy proposition. It's not going to be easy for you to do, and so we're trying to help you to the greatest extent that we can. On the other side, I'm gonna caution you to have empathy for this. Not only do you have to supply an application, but you're supplying an application to a review panel that don't know your organization, that won't know your project until you tell them about it. And so you have to be sure that you're delivering the goods to them. Now, here's something that I learned when I was a kid, because it was who my mom was. She was a technical writer for the federal government, for the USDA. And she told me one time that the standard of technical writing isn't to write something so that it can be understood. You have to strive to write it so it can't be misunderstood. So I'm gonna share that with you all. That's not an easy ticket right there. But think of it this way: if you're giving your proposal to the review panel to review it, if you leave questions unresolved in their mind, that works against you. So try to be sure that you're making your case to them within your project narrative. Next slide, please, Eddie. So this again, identifies the things. These are all laid out in the notice of funding opportunity that tells you what it is that you need to try to convey in your 8-page project narrative. And again, I've taken the prerogative. These are my highlights, called out not to be more important, but to make sure that you don't think of them as less important of what you include in here. So we have a requirement for you to speak to our strategic intent. But again, for this moment, I just want to emphasize to you of the importance of thinking about how you're going to sell to the review panel that your organization is prepared and capable of taking your project through to successful conclusion. And it's you. It's going to be if you get the award, then it's going to be on you, and being ready for it becomes of paramount importance. So that's why I think about just challenging you to have clarity in your description of your purpose, your goals, your objectives, these deliverables, key tasks and milestones are called for. So what might that look like? If you think about steps on your critical path in implementing your project, these are things that you can call out to make sure that they're clear to folks. So in some ways, what I really want to try to do is just to help you think about how to connect the dots between some of these things. So this makes it clear that in addition to the project narrative with its 8-page, you can include project resumes for members of your staff, or maybe from a partner organization that you're going to work with on your project. A letter of support from key partners or constituents can also be included. Those are not limited by a page count, so they're going to seem like a good opportunity for you to get something in there. But think about the connection between why you would include those to the objects here in red that highlight project team skills and experience. So if you're calling out that your chief of interpretation or your staff cartographer is a key person in the project, then it's going to make sense to include their resume. We're not really going to be needing resumes for all the board members, all the staff. We're going to be looking for the resumes that correlate to people who you have built a case for why they are involved in the project and how their skill sets can help in that way. The same is true of the partners. With all due respect, you can all probably get us a letter from your district representative saying, please consider this application, and we will. However, the real letters of support that would be critical would be the ones if you have a partner who has some substantive involvement. They're providing a resource or a staffing or something that is critical to making the project happen. So those are things that again, I want you to be thinking about it from in some ways in this way, to be able to give us a succinct understanding of purpose, goals, and objectives, and your deliverables and your key tasks and milestones will necessitate that you, as a matter of due diligence in advance of submitting your application, have thought through the process for making the project happen from start date through end date. Now, let me quick interject something. I know some of what I'm saying seems very, very, very basic, and many of you live with this all the time, and you'll feel like, oh, geez, he's telling me something not like I don't already know that. We have a lot of folks on this call, some that have a lot of experience doing grants and perhaps even a lot of experience doing federal grants. We're also having to be mindful to talk to some of the folks who have less experience. Bear with me while I do that. If I get to where I'm saying something that again that you feel like is that you already know, just try to bear with me and understand that it's still good advice for you not to forget it, even if you already know it. So again, You're needing to think your way through the project in order to pitch the project in the concise fashion that this 8-page narrative will require you to do, because it's got to cover all of this real estate. So for just a moment, I'm going to share my screen just to show you one. I have some samples I'm going to take you through with some of these, and so hopefully you all are now seeing something that just at the top of the page says project title. Use same title consistently throughout your application package. The SF424A federal application is going to ask for your project title. So just get yourself ready to use the same title all the time, so that you don't lose people's attention on what you're after. Don't try to read this. Actually, forgive me for the fact that I've used somebody else's just for purposes of illustration. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but I don't think we're seeing what you mean for us to be seeing. I'm just seeing you.
Okay. Yes. Okay. You're right. Thank you. So now I'm showing you this thing that says, now are we there yet? Let's see, your screen sharing. What do you see now?
See project title, project overview. It's a Word document.
Excellent. It's just a Word document. This is not again, we'll say this often today. It's not a prescribed format. I'm just trying to make the point that this one is a fairly good example of how one organization thinks their way through the project in order to work towards the sort of narrative that's looking for. They have an overview of the project. And then because they have a project that's composed of several different components of work, there is a brief description of each of those 3 different components of work. For each component, they also then call out the specific deliverables. As they're developing the project proposal themselves, they're thinking through these things so that they can respond to it. And then there's the second component. And again, it's associated deliverables. The third component, and again, associated deliverables. So one of the things, remember, that was called out for in the project narrative is this idea that there are key tasks and project milestones. So, for example, this is just something that the organization did and said, all right, we need to have a good, effective start to the project, and we got to get the partners focused on it. We're going to be working with a steering committee. That doesn't just happen by magic. It happens because there are some deliberate steps to the process that they take. And they're thinking about what is the task, where does it get us, sort of who's doing it, when is it being completed, and they're working their way through these different project components, laying out the schedule, the rolling schedule as work progresses. And it's that kind of process and consideration that allows them to have an answer to the question of what are the key tasks and milestones, which relates to when you would be asking what you would be asking for your overall period of performance. Term of art, again, don't let me confuse you with period of performance, but eventually you're going to be successful, and you're going to be given a grant award, and you're going to get a start date, an award letter that says the grant's been issued. You may begin as of today. And when you're filling out your application, you'll note that in the checklist, it actually just suggests use June 1st, 2023 as a projected start date. Use June 1st, 2023 as a projected start date. Because if everything happens the way we hope it will, you would be able to get started on the project by then. And once you've thought about how long it's going to take you to do it, and maybe you come up with 12 months or 14 months or 24 months or whatever the case, because you've gone through your path, your consideration of that path. Now you're going to be also asking for an end date. Like, we will be able to finish, if we start by June, we will be able to finish by December of June 23. We'll be able to finish by November of 2024. So those are things that you ask for in your application, and you need to have something like this, backing up your decision about why to ask those. So this is just a making a pitch about how someone, another partner in the past has used that process to help them there. And now, Eddie, if you'll help me get back to the slides, I'm going to kind of move us on. Any questions about that so far, folks?
I just put in there's some comments in the chat, Bob. I just put in one to say that, your example was likely for a project that's on the higher scale towards the 150, cap range. If your organization is seeking something in the 25,000 to 50,000 range, the numbers of tasks and the complexity of the milestones are going to be much, much smaller, right? So I saw someone say earlier that the level of detail here might be that they're not ready to apply right now. I understand that, but remember, it's sort of based on scale and scope. If your project idea is, tight and, in the smaller range, then your narrative is going to reflect that. It's not going to take, multiple pages of timelines and milestones. It's going to be shrunk down to fit the scale of the grant application.
Okay. So I appreciate that, Wendy. So one way to look at it is one size does not fit all. I'm showing you all some examples today because a lot, some of these components are required for you to submit them, but there is not a specific format provided for you for that submission. So you can the good news is you can approach it the way you want to. The bad news is you have to figure out how you want to approach it. So that was just a sample of somebody, an approach that another organization I know used it, and that was incorporated ultimately into the award, but it also demonstrated again that they had thought through the process. They knew what the key tasks were. And as Wendy says, if it's a less dimensioned project, it'll be a lot shorter, but it's still going to be important. Nothing begins, miracle happens, ends. You have to be more specific about those points between beginning and end. So Eddie, if you'll take me to the next slide, I want to talk about this one for a moment. Another key part of your submission is a project abstract summary. So this is a little curious, but it is part of the submission requirement. And you as an organization, as an applicant organization, have to at the application stage think about a concise description of your project, which, if you are successful, when you are successful and an award is made, will be used to describe your project on usaspending.gov. Again, an externality. Every award that's made in the federal government system goes on USA Spending for visibility across the government and across the populace. And so this one asks you to provide a short description to include award purpose, activities, deliverables, outcomes, and beneficiaries. So again, what I'm wanting for you to sort of remind yourself is all these pieces that you're working on will help you work on other pieces of this. You see the word beneficiaries there? That ties back to the emphasis on the public purpose. Remember where we talked about the definition of public purpose is how does the public benefit from this project? And so if you've done that, then you've set yourself up for this description. But this one's gonna limit you to 4,000 characters, which is quite a bit less than 8 pages. And so you all probably remember all the way back in writing class in high school or something where it was like, okay, you have to do an abstract for your paper. You do it last. You do it after you've written the paper, because it's only at that point where you know how to be so concise about it. So I'm going to show you a pyramid, right? Like you picture what a pyramid. At the top of that pyramid is this project abstract, where you need to describe all these beautiful nuances of your project in 4,000 characters. Underneath that is the work that you've done to develop your project narrative. And somewhere beneath your project narrative at the bottom of the pyramid is the due diligence that you've done in thinking about when we are successful, how are we going to manage this through to success, to conclusion. And so those are important pieces. So now, Eddie, I'll ask you to the next slide again, and I'll try to pick up a little bit more momentum. So here's another thing. We're gonna these are required components of your submission. The standard form 424, which is the federal application. That one's going to ask you, how much money are you asking from the federal government, from the National Park Service? It's the big, fat, juicy number that you want. Pick a number. Let's say you're going to ask for $45,000 for your project. Again, here's another pyramid. The application, you're going to say $45,000. In the SF424A, and I'm going to show you this document in a minute, so you know, it's going to say, how do the costs break down for the $45,000 that you're asking? And so you're working within what are referred to as the object class categories. That's personnel. It's the fringe or benefits for those personnel costs, travel, contracts, supplies, equipment. It's those are the cost categories, and so you'll be asked to break that down, your big number, into how much you're going to be spending in each of those different categories. And then we have underneath that, again, in the pyramid, is the detailed budget. Because how, ladies and gentlemen, will you answer those questions on the SF424A unless you have done your own budgeting for the project, which thinks about how all the costs are in there? Now, I actually kind of am going to almost just read this stuff in red here, because it's really important to say. The project budget shall include detailed information on all cost categories and must clearly identify all project costs. Unit costs shall be provided for all budget items, including the cost of work to be provided by contractors or subrecipients. And then here's this thing, this little weird situation. There's no uniform format dictated for a detailed budget. In a minute, I'm going to give you some examples of what kind of detail you need to provide. And again, we'll hopefully demystify that for you. But we don't have there isn't a prescribed format for you to use that. Good news, bad news again. So the details, it's up to you to determine how you present it, but you can't not present it. You can't not give us the information that's being sought here. So maybe the next slide, Eddie, and I'll just I think that just takes me. So here's what I'm gonna here's what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at the SF424A, and then I'm gonna show you some template and some worksheets that are out there. Again, it sounds like something that we're, a platitude we're standing on, but it is what it is. It's not a required form. It's not a required format. We're bringing it forward for you all because we're trying to help, again, demystify this. But it's like, we're not making this, we can't make this the form or the format. So it's for illustration purposes. So I'll try to be a little bit more succinct about my screen sharing this time. And let's see, I'm going to go with, here we go, screen share. And we'll go to that one. And we'll go share. And hopefully you are seeing this sheet that says budget detail and instructions. So, you know, what this is doing is it's just giving you a sense of, okay, if the category is the personnel, the people are going to be working on it, this is probably the easiest example to provide, because, you know, your staff will have an hourly rate that's, you know, that reflects their salary. If they're involved here, you're gonna have figured out how many hours they're gonna need to put in on the project, and the multiple of the unit of time, the number of units, the hours, the hourly rate will tell you what the cost is going to be, and you can break that down by position. If you have you know, the fringe or you know, benefits package that they have, likewise has to be figured out in the same way. Now, maybe it's a percentage of their time, or you can just say, you know, if their salary is $30 and their fringe is $5, you can just, you know, work your multiples in that way. This is the kind of, these are the examples of what the cost basis means if you're going to have a, you know, in your SF424A, you're going to say we need $20,000 for personnel. Then this would be how you would break that down by the positions that are working on it in order to arrive at those costs. Travel. Again, picture how that's going to come about. Is it airfare? Is it bus fare? Are you renting cars? Is it a mileage rate that's based on the, you know, on the federal you know, rate per mile for trips? And so you're breaking down what your travel costs are by the trip, by the, you know, by the associated costs with those things as they're coming into play in your project. Now, again, I don't know what your project is. I don't know whether you need these things. This is just to sort of illustrate. Again, same thing with equipment. It's just the basic, you know, rhythm that you're looking for is, you know, what is a unit cost, and how many units are we needing to bring to bear. It would be the same for supplies as well. And you know, so those are all the bits. Now, contracts is one place where it might get a little trickier for you, right? You figure you're going to retain you know, an interpretive consultant to help you do your organization do an interpretive master plan, and you're you know, you're going to do your RFP, and you are going to, you know, ultimately know what your cost is based on those RFP. Maybe you have that cost already from having done that, or you've just talked to another organization that just hired somebody to do it, and they've suggested, hey, it costs us $10,000 to get the kind of services that you're after. So something like a contract, what you're going to do is again, it may be predicated on units of time and the cost rate per unit for somebody's work, and part of the explanation may be, you know, how you have what those costs are predicated on. If you're going to be doing a construction project, for example, maybe your organization or your municipality and your city engineer would be involved in saying, I think $12,000 is going to be you know, a good expectation of the cost, and it's based on their professional opinion. So it's those kinds of things that you're trying to, again, provide in order to substantiate the cost basis for what you're putting in there. Now, I'm going to move on to another document just to show you how, how something like that might play out. If you were sort of deciding to build out something in an Excel spreadsheet or something, and you can start to, you see how this might work. If you're, are we all seeing this thing with lots of yellow and green highlights?
Yes.
We're still with you? Okay. So you can see now you're starting to describe not just hypothetical position number one. We're talking about the crew leader or the assistant crew member or the crew members or something. So you can start to break out their specific costs in your detailed budget in order to convey the information that you need that substantiates your costs and will allow you to know what your bottom line is going to be once you've covered all those things. So again, good news, bad news. You can work, you can create this yourself. It may help you to look at something that seems a little less confusing, in which case I'll just sort of show you this one. So again, this is a relatively large project, but same reminder here, use your title consistently up there when you're identifying it. And so what they've done is they've broken out personnel, fringe, contractual, the different line items, but below it, what they did, again, you remember the example before, they had multiple components. So maybe they're breaking it down by component. Hey, the project manager's involved here, the conservation planner's involved here. Here's where the costs are. And then instead of it all being in there, they've made use of notes within an Excel spreadsheet so they can put in some explanation on that. And there's a whole separate document that explains how fringe is calculated, or there, the contractual support for this engagement contract is predicated on, $2,000. We're figuring, 40 hours at $50 per. It doesn't have to be more complicated than is necessary just to make it clear how a big number is made up of the pieces. Okay, because otherwise $2,000 is, well, $2,000 for what? And so you need to give them what the what is. So I won't spend more time with it. It's just an example. Again, they broke it out by each component so that then they could bring it up to the summary, and they're able to identify what their total direct is, and then they're able to apply their indirect cost rate to it, and then they have the project total. So in any of these approaches can be employed by you to get through your detailed budget. And then for my last illustration, I just want to take just a moment and show you again how the SF424A, which is the budget information for a non-construction program, works. And I mentioned before that it was a fillable PDF. So I'm not going to fill this all the way out, but I'm just going to fill in a few fields, which I hope will help you understand how this might come together. So forgive me, again, for purposes of illustration, I'm going to think about a somewhat more complicated project where it's going to have interpretive master planning, where it's going to have script development, and then the last thing would be program delivery. So purposes of example, again, this is not bad for illustrating Eddie's point about a public purpose. Your organization needs to do the master planning, but it also then wants to get to where you can actually deliver new interpretive programs that are more inclusive, that are telling new stories, reaching new audience. So you're going to script that so that your docents, your interpretive staff know what the program is for delivery, but then you're going to deliver it. You're going to make that available to people, and your public purpose really comes to bear right there where the public has a chance to do it. But here on this document, we'll just say that each of these is going to cost us $15,000. So you see how it's starting to, I fill it in here. This is new federal money you're asking for. It's already totaling it up over there. So these things, this is how this document is going to react for you once you're filling it out. But you want to come to it ready to know what the answers are in terms of the functions and activities and the cost for that. And then then you're going to have to come over here to the next page. And again, here's where those object class categories that we were showing you, personnel, fringe, travel, equipment, supplies, contractual, all those things come in here. And you see the titling of the different components of the project have already been coming in. And suppose sort of the deal here is this is going to be $5,000 for personnel and $2,000 for fringe and $3,000 for travel and $5,000 for contractual. And then you've got it's going to total you up, right? And so again, this is just showing you what you're going to encounter when you're getting into this document. And then it's going to take you over here. And again, it's filling out the different components of the program, but it's asking whether there are non-federal resources. So our requirement, we don't require a match, but you may have other dollars involved, in which case this would be the place to talk about whether you have money from your organization or from state sources, what have you. And then the forecasted cash needs. Understand how this is going to work. Maybe if our total cost for this was $45,000, then, maybe you'll think that we'll start off, with about $5,000 in the first quarter because we'll just be getting into rhythm, and then it'll start spending more rapidly, $10,000 in the second quarter and $15,000 in each of the following quarters. So that's the way that might work. Again, purposes of illustration only, but that's how you would build out something like that. And if you have other reasons to know that it's going to break out differently, like, okay, we got a big contract that's going to come in to bear in the third quarter, reflect that in what you're putting in. So that's about all I really wanted to cover with that. And I know we're starting to run out of time. So I'm going to stop on the sharing and take us back to the slides for a moment. And ask you to move to the next one, Eddie. And we're going down, right? Okay. So I know you all have continued to ask questions, and I haven't stopped to answer them. So a few things we want to reemphasize for you is that the frequently asked questions document that's going to be available on our grants website is critical to you all. Find it, review it, and be prepared to look at it again, because it will remain a dynamic document. The questions that have been posed to us today, we will include in the frequently asked document so that we can provide a careful, thorough answer to those. And by that document can be available to anyone else who may have the same question that they need to pursue. It will be added to all the way through the submission deadline if questions are still coming in at that point. So critical that you see it. Go find the NOFO. If you haven't already looked at the NOFO, that's the single most important document. These review criteria are outlined there. And the point of making this is, again, to emphasize the importance of all of this stuff. We're asking for your project to relate to our strategic themes. We are, critically interested in the connection to equity, inclusion, accessibility, and engagement. We can be impressed by your innovative approaches. And so if, sell that to us in your narratives as well. And as I've been emphasizing with you with some of this stuff, this underpinning of your work that is in the detailed budget and in thinking through your work plan and your schedule and your tasks and your schedule, those are the things that are going to help to provide the clarity of your operation plan and the capacity of your team to implement it, which are important components of the review criteria. Next slide, please, Eddie. And so here we are. We published the NOFO beginning of October. We're having these workshop sessions again today. We're honestly going a bit above and beyond what's often done for grant programs, because we're trying to empathize with your challenge. We know it's a difficult proposition to do these applications, and our interest today was to help make it as understandable as possible. And then, the deadline's January 30th. It'll be given over to a review panel to evaluate your submissions and develop the priorities for award. And then the last thing I want to emphasize, just because forewarned is forearmed, I talked a bit about this period of performance earlier, and that there will ultimately be a start date, because once we've chosen your proposal, and we are working no longer on an application, but we're working on the award documents, that process itself takes a bit of time to get all those things in place. And once it's all done, and the National Park Service and your organization have both signed the grant agreement, and the date that it's co-signed is your start date. That's when you can begin work and can begin incurring costs against your scope of work. That's when you can begin to account for costs for your project, is the start date. And the end date will be set out in time based on what you asked for in your application. And the exact date can't be known, right, until we actually get the awards done and we do it. But in the application, it's going to ask you what's your start date. And so in our checklist, and as I'm going to say again right here, pick out June 1st, 2023. And you aren't all going to have June 1st, 2023, because some of you might be earlier and some of you might be later, but you got to have a date to answer the application cell, June 1st, 2023. Next slide, please. Key dates. We're doing this again on the 17th. We don't think it's going to be any different than what we just did today, but we've recorded today and it'll be put on our YouTube's things in case somebody that missed it, or somebody in your organization that you think would profit from hearing it, then you'll be able to get it there. Deadline's January 30th. And just for what it's worth, we have a high aspiration once we get into the new year of convening some Gateways Network annual conference, which we would be looking forward to seeing you at, whether you are a successful grant applicant or are still going to be working towards being a future successful grant applicant. I think that's all there is from me. Is that right?
Yes, thanks. I know that was a lot, everyone. Thank you so much for sticking with us. That's the reason why we recorded it, so you can go back and double check anything you might have missed. We will be logging all the questions that came in and aggregating them and providing more official answers in the FAQ, especially if you didn't get yours answered. That would be a resource to look at. The website that we, email address here, Chesapeake Grants at NPS.org, is a great place to pose questions to make sure that we can build them in and make sure that we're answering those. And the webpage to the landing page is there, a great jumping off point if you want to go ahead and start diving in. Any other comments from our team before we close? Well, thanks everyone. I really appreciate your time. And as we've all said, we are here for you. So keep those questions coming. Let us know, any barriers that you're seeing so that we can keep those in mind and keep tracking them. And otherwise, good luck to everybody. And we look forward to seeing your proposals.
Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.